All right, now, Mr. Quadros, let's take a leap back in time and talk about some classic fights from back in the days of Pride, which you and Bas Rutten used to commentate from, and that was, of course, the best commentary team of all time to date. So let's start with one of the most, yeah, it absolutely is. Let's start with one of the most historically significant feuds in Pride FC history, and that was the battles that Kazushi Sakuraba fought against the Gracie family. And let's start first at Pride 8, where Sak fought Royce Gracie, which was a controversial finish. So let's kind of talk about, if you remember, any of the events leading up to this match and what happened as the fight unfolded.
Well, what had happened was, prior to the Sakuraba-Royce Gracie fight, Sakuraba was basically a representative of pro wrestling, and he was basically the first pro wrestler who did well in real fighting in mixed martial arts. He was allied with what's his name? Takata.
Nobuhiko Takata.
Yeah, and Takata was one of the founders of Frye Fighting Championships. And Takata had always been challenging Euler's brother, who was regarded as the best fighter in the Gracie family at the time, Hickson Gracie. And Hickson had made world renowned because Royce Gracie had won 3 of the first 4 UFC tournaments, but then said in a press review, well, Hickson's 10 times better than me. So Hickson had this mystique about it. So Takata, way before Pride, had a pro wrestler himself, probably the most famous pro wrestler in Japan before Antonio Inoki, had started to challenge Hickson Gracie in the press. And Hickson said, I'm not going to fight you because you fight fake fights. So if I fight you, people are going to think my fight's fake and it's going to hurt me. So no. So one of Takata's guys, Yoshihiro, who now actually works for Glory, and I see him all the time in Japan, he went to L.A., challenged Hickson in the studio, got the total crap beat out of him by Hickson, went back to Japan. Then they kept luring Hickson with more and more, offers of money. And they tried one. Hickson beat Takata 2 times. But then Sakuraba was coming in, and Sakuraba was the one guy who won a UFC tournament by armbar against Conan Silvera, who outweighed him by almost 100 pounds. And he was beating all these guys all over the place. Everybody was saying, well, wait a minute. This guy might be able to beat the Gracies. So he was trying to, beat any Gracie, Royce, Hickson, whoever it was. Euler took the call. Euler accepted the challenge. He came into the ring of Pride. They had special rules that there was going to be no referee stoppage, no doctor stoppage. The fight had to be stopped by either the corner or submission, the tap out, the giving up of one of the other fighters. So they fought, and Sakuraba dominated the fight, knocked Coleman down a bunch of times with kicks and all kinds of stuff. Got him into a kimura, a hammerlock, basically an upside down key lock, and basically was doing damage. But Euler was extremely flexible. Euler actually never submitted. He never tapped out. So the referee stopped the fight because he thought, okay, this guy's going to get, major damage done. The controversy was the agreement they had before the fight was that there's no way we can lose the fight unless we give up. So that was the contention from the Gracie family. I understand. I've seen that happen before because when Guy Metzger came in to fight Sakuraba, part of the original Pride Grand Prix 2000, the rule was, because he took the fight on short notice, that they were only going to fight 2 rounds no matter what. It had to be a decision after 2 rounds. They fought 2 rounds, and they said, okay, we're going to overtime round. Ken Shamrock said that wasn't the deal. He fought double cross. So sometimes things will change. So Euler Gracie got ripped off. That they should be getting their minds. So Sakuraba thought, well, I dominated the guy. I was going to break the guy's shoulder, whatever. They finally lured Royce Gracie into a tournament format, but they had to make a concession. That same thing. A limited time limit. 15 rounds until somebody gives up. Have one more 15 rounds, one more 15 rounds. So the first matchup in the tournament for Sakuraba was against Royce Gracie. It was May of 2000. They thought the epic battle lasted 90 minutes. Long story short, because of the low kicks from Sakuraba, Royce Gracie they threw in the towel after I think the 6th round. So it was a 90-minute fight. Royce Gracie, they actually submitted verbally. It was Royce Gracie throwing in the towel. Even though Gracie was in the corner, the godfather of what we think of as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So that was 2 down. Some people thought that because he had dominated Euler and because he beat Royce Gracie, now he's 2-0. Next fight, bring out the killer from New York, the transplant from Rio de Janeiro, Renzo Gracie, is going to challenge Sakuraba. People thought, well, Renzo's a pretty good puncher. Renzo, is more in tune of the street fighting element. He's been in all those lucha libre versus jiu-jitsu street battles back in Rio de Janeiro. So this was the guy. They put him in with Sakuraba. It was actually a very close fight. Eddie Bravo and I were calling that one. It was outdoors in Sable Dump. It was like 100 degrees. We're sweating inside of our suits. It was crazy. Finally, Enzo gets back control standing and locks up Sakuraba to the infamous spinning Kimura. Dislocated the elbow of Enzo Gracie. It looks like a Stephen Quadros with a fake arm getting busted. And so there was number 3. Sakuraba had beat 3 Gracie. And then Hein Gracie, the street gangster, the guy who, all this kind of stuff, he came in, apparently injured himself, had used blue tape on his body for whatever reason, I don't know. But Sakuraba got spanked literally in the contest. Sakuraba went 4-0 against Gracie. And so he was termed the Gracie Cone.
All right, and that is the short story of Gracie's versus Sakuraba. Now, I remember early on in the first bunch of Prides, I believe you and Bas and also Maurice Smith later on were doing the commentary basically after the events, and not live at the show. So just tell us, like watching a match like Royce versus Sakuraba, that 90-minute match, how did you guys manage to keep your sanity watching that match? Because there's a lot of points where it gets very slow.
Yeah, well, that was a live call by me, Maurice Smith, and Bas Rutten. Of course, I'm working with 2 legendary UFC champions, and Maurice was the first kickboxer to ever do well. It was a thing where Maurice can get a little long-winded. So at the opening of the show, now this is something that I'm going to get to the Sakuraba Royce Gracie show in a minute, but at the beginning of the show we do an intro. Hi, I'm Stephen Quadros. Blah, 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 blah. What do you think? What do you think? So when I say, Maurice, what do you think? Maurice went on and on and on for it was like a couple minutes. And usually that's that. He kept going on and on and on. So I'm waiting. And I don't want to cut him off. Because we basically didn't rehearse the opening. We just flew with it. And so finally he shoots it back to me, and I wrap up. It's like a good 4-minute opening, which is usually you don't want it. You want it maybe a minute and a half. So we did this opening. Then we said, okay, let's go down to ringside. One of the Pride executives, who actually was a thorn in our side, name escapes me. Thank you.
How convenient.
He came up and he said, no, you got to do the whole opening all over again. He said, why? Because we're basically shooting it and putting on tape. We weren't going to do it live. And so I said, why? He said, because it's not Pride Grand Prix. It's Pride Fighting Championships. Now, we never heard of that before. Because up until that point, it was Pride. That was it. No fighting championships. I'm thinking, what? Okay. So, just adding those 2 words, and I'm so indoctrinated thinking Pride Grand Prix, Pride Grand Prix, Pride Grand Prix. We did the whole thing over. I kind of screwed it up a little bit, actually. But we did the whole thing. Maurice went on forever. And, Bas did his analysis. We sat down to the ringside. The fight came out. Now, understand, this is the year 2000. Digital photography was not the thing. They had film. So Susumu Nagao is a really famous photographer in Japan for all the fight shows. You can look at UFCs and who knows when before the UFC. He told me in an interview when I used to have my own magazine, Fight Sport with Stephen Quadros, put out by Boxball magazine. I asked him, I said, well, what happened during the Sakuraba Royce Gracie fight? He said, we, the photographers at ringside, because the fight went so long, ran out of film. We had to send a young boy to the store to buy more cartridges of film.
Wow.
People don't know that. So this is the click. Wait a minute. I only got 1 roll left, and this is like the first round. What's going on? We're done, man. So that was one of the problems they had. As far as long-windedness, when you've got 3 wise asses, like Maurice Smith, the king of freaking Costas, Bas Rutten and I were a freaking train wreck of hilarity constantly in the hotel, in the walking down the street. We're always goofing around with people, and the Royal Host, which is a restaurant next door to the Dome. So when you got 3 of us in there, we were fine, even though there were a lot of really slow moments in that fight. I mean, ungodly slow. But they'd be sitting there waiting because there were no restarts, there was no nothing. This was a hardcore match for Royce Gracie to show that he was the world's greatest martial artist after winning the tournament in Sakuraba. The party animal who could was going to try and upstage that. So we didn't really run out of ammunition because we basically just started talking about the thin air in the middle of the fight.
All right, so let's talk about one of the craziest fights of all time to ever happen in Pride FC history. Don Frye versus Takayama. And that was just nuts, plain and simple. What do you remember about that match? And how are these fighters still alive today after that insanity?
Well, this is was one of those things where both Don Frye and Takayama were pro wrestlers as well as fighters. But make no mistake, when Don Frye and Takayama fought each other, there was a real fight. There was real pain. There was real punches. And Takayama was this huge Japanese fighter. He had what I always termed as the Rod Stewart hairdo. It was kind of like a kind of spiky, kind of almost like a mullet type haircut. So he stood out, bleached blonde, big guy, giant guy, way bigger than Don Frye. And so when they came into it, I think common knowledge was that Frye was going to beat him, but still, when he stood next to each other, looking at each other in the stare down, Frye was so much smaller than Takayama. And so when they came out there, it actually looked like a hockey fight where they grab onto each other's clothes, but instead of grabbing each other's clothes, they basically collar tied each other around the back of the head and threw their right hands over and over again. It was like a true rock and soccer robot thing, where there's no defense, only offense, and they basically were just socking each other over and over. I don't even know how many. I could sit there and do punch stats, but that would be for somebody else. But, I mean, they just blasted each other into smithereens, and I thought, first of all, they're going to punch each other out. And they did, in fact. But it was Frye just had a little bit more, energy, and he basically, forced Takayama into a bludgeoning mess, and they finally ended the fight with Don Frye winning. But Don Frye probably had to rest that arm for about a month, because, I mean, he put that arm through, he must have thrown about 500 punches just with his right hand. And so that thing must have been in in a coma by itself, like Evil Dead 2 or something. I mean, that fight was hilarious, though, because Boss and I were just laughing our asses off, thinking, this isn't happening. Is this happening? What is this? I mean, they're in the corners. There's no defense. They're just punching each other in the face. It looked like a street fight between two guys in an alley somewhere behind a bar after the bar closes. I mean, it's crazy.
Did you talk to Don Frye after that match?
Well, Don, he's the macho guy. And, obviously we're all out partying because Frye always had these great parties afterwards. I mean, the most amazing parties. And Don was, he's tough, or I'm tougher. Whatever he would do, he would basically just kind of laugh it off, especially if he won. If he lost, then there was a problem. It reminds me of a time where Don Frye hadn't fought in a while because he got his knees messed up pretty bad by Ken Shamrock when he fought from not tapping out to a heel hook.
Yes.
So Pride was going to have their final show. So they wanted to have Don Frye come because he got a big following in Japan. They had him fight James Thompson, who was a capable, but not a great MMA fighter at the time from England. Big guy, muscular. He did the whole thing when he slapped his chest and do all this craziness. So Don Frye lost the fight. James was bigger, stronger, in better shape. Don just didn't have the conditioning. So in the IFL, Don Frye was a coach. So I had to go over and interview Don Frye during a fight in the IFL on TV. So I go over to him and I said, "Okay, how's your guy doing?" "Oh, he's the guy. He's not just following the instructions." I said, "No, listen. You told your fighters that if they lose, that you'll make them walk home. You recently lost a fight in Japan. Who makes you walk home?" And Don Frye turned to me, and that was the one time in my broadcasting career I was a little bit afraid. He looked at me with his look, and I thought, "Oh, no. And he goes, "Nobody makes me walk home." And I said, "Okay, fine. That's back to you, Kenny and Boston." So I walked out of there, but he's a character, man. Don Frye is an original.
In general, with all MMA events, there's always fights that are supposed to happen or they try to make happen, but they never can happen. So I want to ask if you remember any fights that were scheduled to happen in Pride, but never got around to being put on, essentially. Like, I remember the original main event of the first Pride was supposed to be Mark Kerr taking on Royce Gracie. So, do you recall any fights in your time with Pride that were supposed to happen but never quite did? Like maybe Boss versus Hickson or anything else?
Well, we all wanted to see Hickson Gracie fight, some of the top guys in Pride, whether it be Boss, whether it be Dan Henderson, whether it be Vandalay, whoever it would be. Because Hickson, the problem is that Hickson's, his generation was actually one before the whole Pride era or the UFC beginning era. He was basically in the 80s. So he was already getting long in the tooth. I think that one fight that I would have really liked to have seen, actually a couple fights, there's a little guy from Ukraine named Igor Vovchanchin. I would have loved to see him fight Dan Henderson or Vanderlei Silva.
Yes.
I mean, really, because I thought that they would have been stylistically a great matchup because Vanderlei, at that time, he wasn't the puncher he is now in the UFC. He was a Muay Thai fighter. He used a lot of knees. He punched a lot of guys, knocked them off. But it was that palm clinch of his that was the most devastating weapon. Dan, on the other hand, was sort of like a Bo Chanson-style fighter. For whatever reason, Bo Chanson was never matched against either one of those guys. And he was a huge star in Japan. His stardom was only rivaled by Sakuraba's. He was so incredibly popular, and he wasn't a side talker. He wasn't a pro wrestler. He didn't have fancy haircuts or do backflips or anything like that. He just came out there and smiled, looked down, and threw that overhand right. I think that Bo Chanson is the guy that I want to see fight a bunch of different people. But I think that because there was a mentality that Vanderlei had this thuggish thing, Clinton had his vibe, Sakuraba had his quirkiness. I think that, and it's not unusual that a promoter will take the guys that are better with the media. Bo Chanson wasn't very good with the media. He was giving him an ankle without that. They took the guys that were better from the media and put them into the more glamorous fights. And it makes sense because they want to make money. Because fans will get excited more about a Vanderlei fight than they probably would about a Bo Chanson fight. But as far as fighting style, as far as the charisma of the little guy with the big stick, Bo Chanson versus Henderson or Vanderlei would have been gold for me.
All right, now last question. Did you and Bas ever pull any pranks on each other or on any fighters backstage?
I think Bas and I used to pull pranks, but see, pranks are something that, I mean, we've seen a lot of pranks in the Ultimate Fighter where people do things that are going to try to embarrass or humiliate someone, and some people think, oh, that's a prank. We would do stuff that wouldn't be as degrading, but would be really childishly funny. For instance, as soon as we got off the plane, we had to go to a production meeting. So we're all completely tired. So Bas maybe we're kicking back a couple beers before the production meeting. So we sit there. We all had our Japanese cell phones. Our producer was Michael Braverman, and he was a great producer for Bas and I because he let us unleash this more comedic, theatrical skits that we would do before the openings and things like that, which were basically a brainchild that I wanted to do early on, but from Braverman, they wouldn't let us do. So Braverman is in these meetings with us. So I'm sitting there with Bas, and I'm always tapping him. We're like two kids in the back of a classroom who are up to no good. Okay, so we're there, and I got my Japanese cell phone, and I show it to him. I'd have Braverman's number queued up. So Bas would look at it, and he'd shake his head like, no. So I'd call block. So I'd press the button, and it would be silent, and call Braverman. Braverman would go over his phone right in the middle of a production meeting when they needed his attention to be listening to what they were saying. He'd grab his phone 1 second, then as soon as he put up to zero, I'd hit hang up. We'd be kind of looking around like acting all innocent. We'd do stuff like that. Another thing is that when Bas and I, this is kind of good. Bas and I were doing like a recap show, like a historical throwback. I think it was called Pride Retro or something, where we would go back and talk about old Pride fights that had happened. And so we're there in like this little made-up studio for ESPN Japan. Austin said, hi, everybody, Stephen Quadros on the Fight Professor. Next day, Waffle Bas Rutten. We're here, we're going to talk about this fight or whatever the fight was. So the next fight coming up was Takata versus Coleman. So there were some rumors about that fight being a little fishy in some ways.
Indeed.
Bas said, Stephen, I don't know about this fight. You handle this one. I said, I got this handled, Bas. I'll take care of the whole thing. So they go, okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. They count me back in, and I go, hi, everybody, Stephen Quadros again with Bas Rutten. The next fight is former UFC tournament champion, Off the Hammer Coleman, against the most popular pro wrestling icon in Japan history since Antonio Inoka over Yuki Takata. Bas set this one up for us. And he looked at me like with his look like, you want to strangle me. But we got through it because we basically joked our way through it. Another time we're there and we're on camera and we're on a couch and there's a wall right behind us. And so Bas is talking and he's looking at me. And so I do not a spinning back fist, but a back knuckle, a back fist right on the wall, right next to his head, like whack, like really hard, right in the middle of him talking to me. And he totally lost it. And then of course we recovered, but it was like one of those moments where that's the thing that people are going to remember. They're going to remember something really really out of the ordinary rather than the perfect guy who never misses a beat. No. What do you think, Anderson Cooper? Okay, Piers Morgan? Okay, blah, 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 I mean, that's good. I mean, I love professional broadcasting, and I want to be a member of the top tier of that crew. But you got to be able to have some fun.
Well, Mr. Quadros, you absolutely are the top tier of mixed martial arts commentary and kickboxing commentary as well. I believe that's going to be it for today. I think I've taken up enough time from your Saturday. All right, is there anything else that you wanted to plug or promote before we wrap up?
I mean, you can basically, if you want to contact me, Stephen Quadros, StephenQuadros. You can basically put that after Facebook.com/Stephen Quadros, Twitter.com/Stephen Quadros, or StephenQuadros.com, and you can find me. I'd love to hear from you. I'd like to thank all the fans from around the world for supporting the combat sports and supporting the athletes, and for supporting me and some of my other brethren in the journalistic and broadcasting elements. I'd like to thank the Fight Nerd, Matthew Kaplowitz, for having me on. It's a pleasure, my friend.